I sort of almost fell into it, I guess. I never at one point went, I want to be a film journalist, this is what I want to do. I was just a kid that grew up just loving films, and because I moved around so much when I was a kid, I never had a real sense of home. And so cinema was like that constant thing. It was always there, and I found that sort of connection and universality, because like even if people are on alien planets or like, I don't know, in a tiny town in New Zealand or something, it was always kind of the same human experience. So I felt like, oh, it's okay, like home is, I guess, inside of you, which is really cheesy. But so I knew from like a really young age I wanted to do something in film, and for ages, and I think still now, I wanted to do acting. I wanted to do acting so badly, and it didn't really work out. Didn't work out, but I'm still sort of, so yeah, I don't know even if film journalism is the end game for me. I just sort of started doing it, and people said nice things, and it's that kind of thing that just whenever someone starts going, you're good at this, keep doing it, you go, yeah, sure, okay. And yeah, so I've just kept going, and maybe this is my destiny, or maybe I'll shoot off and do something else, but yeah.
And is it, do you have a day job, or do you make a living from film journalism?
I'm trying to, I guess because I'm really young and naive, but yeah, I do have to do other stuff. I do like promo jobs and stand in shops and try and sell people shampoo, which is an experience in itself. The feeling I get when I like talk to like my friends, or when I meet strangers and I tell them what I do, is that there's this idea that like film critics are just these very bitter, very angry people who like want stuff to fail. And I think that's the biggest misconception. I always find myself explaining to people, being like, no, I want things to be good. Like, it makes me really sad when a film is bad. It upsets me. Like, so I think that's a sort of huge thing that I think is almost dragging film criticism down, that idea that it is all about judgment and placing judgment on things and being like, oh, this is so bad, and that idea that by judging something you are automatically saying that you're above it, and I don't think that's true at all. The idea that they come in, they say, you shall like this film, you shall not like this film, and I just don't think that's anything about what it should be about. I think to me it's just such a different world. It's just about sharing experience and saying, well, have you ever thought about it this way? And someone else will come along and say, no, I think it's this way. And it sort of opens up your perspective on things, which is what those are the moments where I get really excited and really passionate about it. I get just so excited when I see something, especially something that is so out of the blue. It's like a film that no one's really talked about, and you just see it, you come across it, and you just have that moment of like, wow, this film it expresses so much of myself, and I just get so excited and I want to share that feeling with people. And then I get even more excited when other people come back and say, I feel the same way. And it's that feeling of community, and you just sort of, you don't feel so, it's a way of not feeling so alone in the world, I guess, which is quite a sad way to look at it. But I don't know, it's kind of how I see it. I think maybe the reason I do it is probably different to other people, because when I sort of talk to other film critics about it, I feel a slight sort of gap in thinking. But for me, I think I love it because it's kind of the start of a conversation, and I just really want people to really engage with the films that they're watching, and not just to go to the cinema and passively let things go inside their brain and not think about it. Because I think for every single person who goes to the cinema, those films in their own tiny, tiny way sort of form a part of how you self-identify, I think, and they sort of mold your view of the world as well as you're growing up. And that's where your sort of taste in movies change as you grow up and you turn into sort of different people. And I think that's so fascinating, and that's what I find so interesting. So I think I always like to think of myself as I offer my own perspective, and I sort of challenge the reader or the audience to also think about it in that way, and not just to go, yeah, it was great, yeah, it was bad, to really think about what it's teaching them about the world, how it makes them feel, what it reminds them of their own selves. I always try and think about what I've gained from it, because I I think there's so many critics who are really great at like contextualizing movies within sort of the film canon, and I'm not great at that. It's just not a skill that I have. So I think my sort of thing that I try and bring to it is I sort of put it in the context of just world experience, how we sort of look at the world and think, well, what is this film teaching me? How is it? It's more kind of an emotional reaction of how is it making me feel? How is it making me view the world? Like, is it a positive thing, or is there something really negative about it? So I guess, yeah, like the only times I really sort of dig into movies is when I think they have something sort of like offensive or like, I don't know, damaging about them, that I think, oh gosh, people don't go see this because this is gonna ruin how you view the world. So yeah, I think I really try and go with my gut, because I think every person is so unique in their perspective. So I think it's really great when people just go with their gut and just say, these are my feelings about it. I haven't sort of gone and researched what other people have said, and I've not gone and like watched every other film this director's made, because I think sometimes it's nice just to look at things as an individual sort of product almost. It does feel so reductive to be like, this is 3 stars, this is 4 stars, because you're trying to compare things as well that are so different, and I think it's just impossible to compare film in that way. But at the same time, I think it is sort of necessary in some ways, because I think that's sort of what people want. They want some sort of value judgment, otherwise they don't know what to go see at the cinema. And they're just going to stand there being like, oh God, like this person said it was interesting, but I don't know what that means. So I really, really struggle with star ratings, because I don't know what 3 stars means. It just seems like such a meaningless phrase to me. Like, yeah, it's like, oh great, you put 3 little stars on a thing that I don't, okay. But I can kind of, I don't know, I'm not answering this very well. Yeah, so I sort of really struggle with it, because I know that it's needed, and it's such a core part of film criticism is value judgment, whether it's 3 stars or 4 out of 5, or one sentence being like good, bad, thumbs up, thumbs down. That's the part that I get really scared of, because I would hate for people just to look at star ratings and not see what I mean, because I think 3 stars to me is such a subjective thing. And I think what is sort of important about film criticism is to just let people know what this film is going to contain, and something that I hate is going to be the best film someone else has ever seen, and I'd hate for them to not go see that film because I said it's 2 stars, just don't bother. So it's tough, because I think star ratings in a way try and make film objective, and film is so not objective. If we start going down that direction, I think it's going to turn into a nightmare of being like, who's right, who's wrong, everyone's mad and arguing at each other. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that worries me about star ratings. I think in terms of new media, I think review aggregators I see as something slightly different, because I don't necessarily love the idea of them, because it is sort of turning everything into some sort of objective good, bad, and there's no room for nuance with like Rotten Tomatoes. And but I think in terms of just new media in general, I do see it mostly as a boon, because it does sort of just open a level playing field, which is, I think, so important to make sure that there's new voices coming through, and it's not the same like 3 people like churning out reviews for everything, which I think is important in terms of film criticism always evolving, because I think there's always this worry that it's just going to become really stagnant, because it's going to be that tiny minority of voices sort of dominating everything. And I think it makes it so much more exciting, because there's new things coming through with like podcasts, and I think with YouTube it is such a sort of new frontier for it, and it's why I've sort of jumped in head first to do it, because I want to see where we can go with film criticism. What can we change? Can we move it away from this idea of like, let's put a star rating on it and that's it, and we'll just shove it up and people will only go see 4-star films. So I think YouTube really sort of captures what I love most about film criticism, and it's that idea of community and sharing thoughts and ideas, because you ramble on for 10 minutes and people will actually sit and watch that 10 minutes of video. I don't know how, but and and then they'll comment and it starts a discussion and you have all these people down below like sharing all their ideas. And I think there's this idea as well, because you're sitting in front of a camera, you're quite vulnerable in a way, because you're not hiding behind a computer screen like the voice of God. You're just like, hi, I'm a human being and this is how I feel. So I think people feel a bit less of that distance, because I think with old print and old media and the official sort of the man at the Guardian who writes the reviews, there has always been a little bit of that distance of this person is the voice of God and he tells you what to think, and you feel like if you don't agree with that review, you just feel a bit trapped, because there's no way of being like, but this is how I feel. And I think people are starting to realize that. I think people are starting to realize with things like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all these things that they do have a voice, and every single person, you don't have to be a professional film critic with like 20 years experience. Every person has an opinion and has a right to voice that opinion. And I think possibly a direction for film criticism to go in the future is to be less of the voice of God telling you what to think, but to be the focal point of a community, and for people to kind of gather around this one person and use it as kind of a basis for a discussion. I've only had vaguely funny experience. Like the best one I've had is someone found my Facebook to send me a message because I wrote something bad about Christopher Nolan, and obviously people care a lot about this guy. I knew that was a mistake when I did it, but I did it anyways, and I paid the price. Like, this person found my Facebook to be like, "You attention-seeking dumbass," and like with a giant picture of someone doing the middle finger. And I think, as long there are really nastier versions of that get really personal and really do attack people, and that's awful. But I think if it's just someone being like, "You're an idiot because you didn't like the thing I like," it's the kind of thing you just sort of, it's kind of funny and it's a bit dumb, and just to be like, well, people really care about that thing and it's nice that they're passionate about it, but like that person is also probably a 13-year-old boy. So
when there is this kind of conversation that follows, say, a YouTube review that you do you re-engage? I mean, do you stand aside and let other people take over at that point, or do you actually comment back and re-enter the conversation?
Yeah, I always try and comment back. I always try and just make sure the discussion keeps going, because I think if you just leave it, then it's just people making statements. And what I like is when people sort of bounce off each other going, "Well, I thought this, and actually you made a really good point." And what I've loved about these YouTube things is I'll comment back and we'll start to form new ideas together. Like, I had a review for It Follows, and everyone was sort of finding different explanations for what was going on, and we were all kind of building it together. And someone would make a good point, and I'd be like, "That's a really good point, but maybe you'll say this," and then a second person would like comment down below being like, "Oh, I noticed that this happened." And it's really exciting to just see all these people kind of coming together. And I think I've noticed as well that if you engage with people, even if they say something negative and they say, "I think you're wrong and this is stupid," if you engage, then they sort of realize that you're a person again. And so I've had things where someone has written something negative and I've gone, "I get your point. I mean, this is how I feel about it, but I can see your opinion and how you'd feel about it. Tell me your opinion. Tell me why you love or hate this movie." And they suddenly become a human being again. And like the next comment will be them being like, "Oh wow, you've actually treated me like I have a voice instead of like the like idiot person down below who we all ignore." So I think that's been really refreshing, and it's been a really cool experience to be able to do that. I know it's quite maybe a bit of a radical opinion to have, because I think it's sort of scary in some ways, because it almost suggests that a film critic won't become valuable anymore. But I think there's still going to be value in them, because you need a focal point, you need somewhere for people to gather, and you need the start of the discussion to sort of you need someone to sort of just fire off the discussion, and then everyone can come together and discuss it below. Because I think I've noticed with YouTube, you get people who, they're not like cinephiles. They're not people who go on Twitter and are constantly like shouting out their opinion. They're people who have felt this way, but they don't really feel comfortable discussing it because they've always assumed that their opinion isn't really valuable in that sense. And so I've met really nice people on YouTube who are like, none of my friends want to listen to me, and it's so nice that like I can come here and can talk about it, and no one judges me, and no one's going to tell me I'm an idiot. So I think that is possibly a future for it, where film criticism can really thrive without it sort of clinging to the same ideas and same values like constantly. I think there's always going to be a desire for sort of a physical, like curated copy of something. I think maybe it's just the form might have to change slightly, because I think people are always going to want to read essays and interviews and those kinds of things as well. So I think you can almost kind of branch it off in two directions. Like you can have this sort of more official thing of these long form essays and interviews and reviews that people can kind of just have this curated copy every month. And I think there's always a desire for regularity. So people want something in their hands every month to read on the train to work or whatever. So I think there's always going to be a space for that. I think in terms of just the larger sort of community and how we approach the idea of film criticism as a whole, I think maybe that's the thing that will have to change and evolve like over the years. You know, everyone just sort of has their own voice, and I don't think that necessarily changes the second you get paid. It's not like, I guess like the second you get a check in your hand, you're like, I feel differently about this now. So no, I wouldn't really see any distinction. I mean, with like unpaid film critics, obviously there's so many of them, and everyone is starting up a blog now, so there's obviously so many options, and not everyone is going to be as dedicated as paid film critics are the people who are so dedicated and they want to give their whole life to this. And obviously it's different in that sense, that there's people who have so much passion for it, but I think there's people who are unpaid and do it unpaid every day, and they still have as much passion as the paid film critic. They just haven't been like discovered yet, or they just haven't found their like channel to get money and be able to do the thing they love. It's interesting because I tried to do acting for so long, and it's such a similar world, because it's a world in which people are doing a job that so many other people want to do and think is so exciting and glamorous. So it's one of those things where it's very difficult to get paid, because people think you just want to do it, and you'll do it. You will pay other people to be able to write about films. So it's a very strange job, because you're not quite sure how to value yourself, because you don't know at what point you go, yes, I deserve to be paid now. I am this much good. So it's very strange. And I had that same thing with acting, and my best friend's an actress, and she has that exact same dilemma of being like, I work so hard, like I'm so passionate about this, and this is such a fun job, but I work so hard, and I feel like I work like insane amounts, and I like just go drive myself crazy because I'm trying to write so much, and I just haven't been out of the house for like 2 days, and I'm just typing like furiously. And I think people who sort of think of film criticism as so glamorous and so easy, I think people think of it as really easy, and it's like, well, it's not. It's so hard, and it's difficult because so many people think that it's easy and that it's just a fun like hobby that you do on the weekends. And yeah.
I think people think that film criticism starts and ends with watching the film.
Yeah.
And don't realise that that's actually where it starts when the film is over, rather than when you're watching the film.
Yeah. And you're not even really like, when you're watching a film to review it, you're not even just like watching it, because your brain, like my brain's like going around like clogs, being like, what do I think about this? Is this symbolism? Is this important? Should I write this down? And it's just, you don't really relax. I mean, it's really enjoyable because you get to get sucked up in a movie, but at the same time, you're like, at the back of your brain, you're so conscious of being like, what angle am I going to take on this? So yeah, it's I think there is sort of certain conceptions about people who who just think, oh, it's like a fun job, you just go see the film at the cinema, and then you go la 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 la, and then you send it off, and it's hard. I get really horrible writer's block, and I'll just be pacing around my like kitchen being like, why can't I remember words? And yeah, it's tough, and I don't want to give up because I really love doing it and I feel it's so rewarding, but there are days where it's tough because you feel like you have no value because you're just like screaming into the abyss.
I know, I mean, I don't want to name names, but I know you and I have both had a kind of blow this week, and it's funny when, you know, because if you work freelance, you make so little money. I don't think people realise just how little money film critics make if they're freelancers.
Yeah.
And because of that, if you lose a gig from which you actually make very little money, it can mean the difference between your contemplating your entire existence or just picking yourself up and carrying on, which is not straightforward when you're operating on so little money. And this isn't really a question. I'm just
having a little rant.
But it's unbelievably tough out there if you want this to be a career as opposed to a hobby. And it's very easy at the moment if you want it to be a hobby. It's never been easier.
Oh yeah.
But it's not easy beyond that.
Yeah.
And the thing about constantly questioning your own value, man, boy, do I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's so weird because my old flatmate, who was just a really good friend of mine, like he has a normal job where he gets paid normal amounts of money, and like when I talk to him and I tell him like how much I've earned that day, he'll be like, what? Like people can't, because people like the second you tell them like the actual and this is probably not good for this, but the second you tell people the actual physical amounts of money that you're earning like per article, they're like jaws drop, because they're like, what?
I made £35 this week.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. Yeah.
And it's like, I worked all day and I got a tenner. And it's so but it's really strange because you can't, at the same time, you can't really blame anyone. Like, I know with acting there's a real exploitation there, because people know that people will act for nothing because they just want to be on screen. But I think with film criticism, it's more that it's an industry that literally just has no money anymore because of this struggle, because it's the struggle between print media is dying, we don't know what's going on with online, no one's quite figured out what's happening with film criticism at the moment, and it's kind of weirdly floating through. And so that's it, and it's hard because you don't feel like you can make a stand again, and it's like make a stand against it and be like, I want to be paid, because no one has any money, and people will be very upfront and be like, if we had money we'd give it to you, but we don't have any.